need to call this, okay, so we have training of 8 today. We are fortunate to have Dr. Carlos Dupree. I've met the gentleman. I actually interviewed, I was in the committee to interview, and he's a great person. Jim Rice was our TASB president, and so anyway, we have this team of 8 training today, and we're missing a couple of board members, so we're focused not to Rihanna Gonzalez, but it's great to have everybody else, so we'll go to the floor, and
Well,
you
thank
can
you.
eat with us as well, okay?
I am. I'm eating cookies. And I was trying to reconcile because Dr. Rios had said you all eat healthy, and I look at all the grilled chicken, and then I see 2 big trays of cookies and brownies. So you're my kind of leaders right there.
Your wife told us to keep an eye on you.
Yeah. No, Dr. Rios treated me. We went to a nice lunch today at Palenque.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I got to have caldo de res, which is one of my favorites. So I'm not starving yet, but my little sweet is nice. So it's good to be with you all this evening. As I understand, this originated, the idea of me coming originated at the Tex Ed Con, TASB convention. Some of you attended the session that I gave on kind of aligning your budget with your strategy. And Carlos reached out and asked if I would be available to come down. And I said I would love to come down. This is the kind of thing I most enjoy doing during this season of my career. So we're going to spend some time together. It will be somewhere between 2.5, 3 hours. Both, I think you all have been on the board long enough to know what board training looks like. But the goal is really to get you all talking more than anything. You know, I can stand and talk for hours, but I want to address a couple of things. First of all, you know, we're here to strengthen your team relationships. That's one of the most important things, and you know that, having been on the board for a while. And I've had the blessing of working with 2 really strong boards in Pflugerville and in Fort Bend that had strong relationships because they were intentional about getting to know one another, respecting one another, and valuing one another. And from everything I'm hearing about you says you all are on that same path and you function well together as a board. But it never hurts to try to just keep doing a little work. It's like in marriage, it's always refining and strengthening. So we want to spend some time just strengthening your relationships, kind of enhancing your overall effectiveness as a board too. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement, where we may be really good today, but what can we do to go to the next step? When I was superintendent in Fort Bend, the board, you know, I've been there a number of years and we were doing great work. All the student outcomes were going up. We were winning awards on the state level. And then in my evaluation, they said, well, you're doing a really good job, but we think you could do even better if you got an executive coach. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll do that. And I did, kind of a little skeptical, thinking, what am I going to get out of it? But I ended up realizing I grew tremendously. Just with a little refinement, working in a new way, doing training a different way. And so that's one of our goals tonight, is just having conversation that might add something new and of value to you as a team. And then in kind of talking about planning the evening, working with Dr. Rios, it really came up that you all are in the middle of a 5-year plan from 22 to 27, and that things are underway, they're going well. And as we're going to talk about, we just have to really keep coming back to that as a focus. And that then links to how we connected at first at that conference in Tascatasi when I was talking about we're deploying all resources in support of the strategic plan. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. One of the things that's important to me as a facilitator is having you be fully engaged. You know, I know you're going to sit and listen. I'm not worried about that. I know you're going to take it in. But I really want to know also that you're going to really engage in conversation, that you'll speak up, that you'll add your voice to the conversation, because that's really some of the key to building a relationship and advancing the work of an effective team, as you know. But sometimes it's good to have guidelines around that. So it's important as we work together tonight that in everything we do, you're looking at the organization, you're looking at your team of the board and superintendent, but you're also looking at yourself, self-evaluating, evaluating yourself, your contributions, how you show up as a board member, what you add, what you don't add, what you could add differently that maybe you're not right now, how you can yourself rise in any way possible, your own personal self-improvement. It's also important that if you think it, say it to a point, you know. But sometimes we pull back and we don't say something that might have been pivotal and add a lot of value, either because we don't have the confidence, we don't think that we're gonna sound like we're smart enough, or we don't, well, maybe they're not gonna respect that, maybe it's not gonna add value. But just put it out there. You never know how one comment that nobody else thought about except you can really help to shape how others are learning and growing. So if you think it, say it, add it. The other thing is you get out of it what you put into it, and I'm gonna let that stand as it is. And sometimes too, one of the things that happens in trainings like this, especially with groups who work closely together, is we're reluctant to say something because we think others might feel like we're indicting them or blaming them or making an offhand comment. So it's important that nobody take anything personally. You know, you all need to feel very free to speak what's on your mind about the organization, about the board, about your role, without feeling like somebody is gonna take offense to it. So I just challenge you, you know, one of the rules in my life that I learned about 5 years ago that was transformational professionally and personally was not to take things personally and not to make assumptions about, you know, if somebody says something, don't assume it's about me. Assume they're making a point and we can all benefit from it. And if I feel a little guilty, then maybe I need to look at myself, but don't assume that they are blaming or trying to be negative toward me. So I want you to not take anything personally. And as always, you know, I know we're recording it for the benefit of the board members who can't be here, but other than that, what is said here stays here. This isn't, you know, that's important for us to know. And then just take care of yourself. We might take a break at some point, but if not, if you need to use facilities, you know, get up, get a drink, do what you need to do. Or if you need a break, tell me, well, I need a break. That's okay. I'm flexible. I'm here to serve you all. And maybe we'll laugh a little bit, have a little fun along the way. Is there anything else that you all typically add or would want to see on that list as we get started?
Well, one thing, you know, that it hasn't always been like this, and we've worked our way. There used to be a time where somebody would ask a question, and you know, my history, my background is I used to be a teacher, principal, you know, here in the district for 5 years, 2 years elsewhere. But there was a time where somebody would ask something related to, let's say, middle school, and I would answer it, and that person was like, I'm not asking you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you for it. Oh, okay. Oh, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, so it hasn't always been like this, and we realize that it takes work sometimes, you know, to really work together, and we have worked together. We realize that the work of the superintendent is very important, and he's a busy person, and so we try not to sometimes interrupt the day with minor things. But over the years, we have focused more on those instructional issues, not so much on minor things, but really on progress, student progress, and we do a lot of facility repairs, and our buildings look great, but the most important things are students and our teachers and hiring the best qualified people. And over the years, we realized that everyone is struggling to find those teachers, you know, and the employees that need to fit in with the total program. But I think we don't disrespect each other. If somebody says something, you know, we'll listen, and never to the point of saying, that's not important, you know, I don't know why you're bringing that up or anything. We have a lot of respect for each other, and I think that has gone a long way. And this is why our superintendent's still here with us. They've also brought out after 3 years, 9 years. How many? 11 years.
County.
11.
Who's counting?
But I appreciate that affirmation. It's important, and it speaks a lot about your team. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else before we go on? Well, next thing I'd like to do is really just introduce myself to you. Some of you've heard me speak, some of you have, but not everybody. But I'll be brief, but I want you to kind of know what brings me to this place and why I'm doing what I do today. So I was, I mentioned to some of you earlier, I was born in Morocco. I was adopted. So your Air Force base brings a little emotion to me because I was born in Casablanca. The day I was born, I was taken to the hospital on base in Casablanca because that's where my parents lived. My dad was in the Air Force. And my mother couldn't have children. She was a type 1 diabetic back in the 50s and 60s. And, care for diabetes was much different back then than it is today. And so she could not have children and really wanted a child, and they wouldn't let her adopt in the U.S., so they adopted me while they were there. But then in 1963, the base closed, and they transitioned back to stateside, and we were in San Antonio. And when I was just a few days before my 6th birthday, my mother passed away of diabetes. And then 2 years later, my dad in 1967 decided he did not want a little brown baby because it was a white family that adopted me. In the 60s, with all that was going on in the world, he decided he did not want me anymore. So he went to court and he terminated custody. And I ended up a ward of the state of Missouri and spent 11 years living in an orphanage. The gift that I was given was, number one, it was a faith-based orphanage. I had wonderful care. I was protected, good food, no abuse. It was hard, as you can imagine, but it was a good, safe place to be. But the teachers in that school system took excellent care of me. I was the only person of color in the entire school system. Yet, and sometimes words that shouldn't have come up did come up, but the teachers always took immediate action to protect me, to discipline other children. And they just helped me to see what I could be and do in this lifetime. And I ended up, because of my background, getting a degree in accounting. So I was, kind of follow my storyline, I grew up in Stratford, Missouri, had 65 students in my graduating class. I was drum major, student body president, and yearbook editor my senior year, and president of almost all the clubs, because I was a driven achiever, because of the way the teachers spoke hope and truth and a future to me. They held me accountable. They let me slack because of my background. Went to Harding University. It's a faith-based university in Arkansas. Finished there in 4 years. Was on track to be an English teacher. And then I realized all my teacher friends were making $10,000 a year in 1984. And my accounting friends were making $25,000 a year. So I changed degree plans my junior year and got an accounting degree and got recruited to work in the oil and gas industry in Houston. Started my first job there in August of '84. Worked in public accounting at Arthur Andersen for a couple of years. Didn't like it. Then I moved into an accounting job in a natural gas company, and it was a good job. And I was fulfilling all of my need to teach and to invest in young people through my church. I was that guy who went on all the youth retreats and taught Sunday school and I was with kids all the time. Really enjoyed it. But then in 1995, my boss, of all people, came to me and said, one of the elders at our church is the new superintendent in Fort Bend ISD, and he needs 4 certified public accountants to join his business staff. Are you interested? And I said, absolutely, I love education. And so I came to take education as an accountant. And over a few years, I went from accountant to CFO of Fort Bend ISD. At the time, we had about 60,000 kids. We were opening 4 or 5 campuses a year. It was a very fast-growing school district. And I got the opportunity to be CFO. He left, the guy who hired me left after 5 years, and then the new superintendent came in, and shortly thereafter said, you need to be the superintendent. And I said, but I'm an accountant. I don't even know how that's going to work. And she says, there's ways you can get a waiver. And so she got me hooked up with a master's program. I got a master's. I have all the principal certification except the actual certification because I've never been a teacher or principal. And so then she left and I left, went to Pflugerville in the Austin area to be deputy superintendent. It's kind of my next career move, never imagining that 4 months later I would be superintendent of schools. And so I served in Pflugerville for 7 years as superintendent. Then Fort Bend called me back to be superintendent, where I served for 8 years. I've got 2 children. My oldest son is adopted, as I was, as we had trouble conceiving, and so we adopted him. He's a biracial, black, white child. My wife is an African-American from Memphis, and so he looks a little more like me with his coloring. He's 34, and he has a 12-year-old son and a 9-month-old daughter. And so we have a 32-year-old son who's a birth child. They both have their own issues, as you would expect, being with adoption and some of his detachment from his birth family and things. And my other son had some significant special education needs with some just mental health disorders. But today, they're both thriving in their 30s, doing life, on their own dime, and that's the most important thing, as you know. We don't love everything about their choices, but in the end, they're paying their own way, and they're adults, and we love them, and we're just going to keep loving them and supporting them. But I did leave the superintendency in the fall, in June of 21 was my last. I shook my last hand at graduation. I shook 6,000 hands that year at graduation with 11 high schools in Fort Bend. Shook the last one on a Wednesday night and drove away and never went back. And so then I had that blessing. I feel like I got the golden ticket to work at TASA, the Administrators Association. They needed some leadership support there, so Kevin Brown called me and said he wanted me to join his team. And so I've been with them now for 2 years, where I do a lot of work around leadership development, executive coaching of superintendents, and just wellness. I do a lot of wellness work as well, and now I do board trainings and leadership team development trainings as well. So that's what I enjoy doing. I'm kind of one of those people, and just like you're called to what you do. I'm called to just invest in people. That's what fills my cup and what helps me add value. And I wanna share something very personal with you, because it always feels weird being a former superintendent training a school board. And I know some board members, they're like, well, we don't need a former superintendent telling us how to be a good board member. But I want you to understand one of the reasons, and I think if you talk to any of the board members I have ever worked with, they would tell you I was effective as a superintendent because I always kept my board in the forefront. And it sounds, I don't want to diminish the role of the superintendent, but the way even when I talk to superintendents, I say I always knew my place. I knew that the board was the governing body, that it's the board's job to govern, and it's my job to manage in accordance with their vision and their mission and their goals. Now, of course, as we're going to talk about, you have to work together. You have to work very collaboratively of a healthy teammate. But with the superintendent, and I think Carlos really, I see this in evidence in just engaging with him. He understands his role and the board's role. And that's what leads to the success that you're enjoying now. And that's how I feel, that's how I always felt. So I'm not going to be preaching to you about how to support your superintendent more. I'm going to be encouraging you as a team to work within your lane strongly and assertively as a governing body, as the management, the chief executive officer of the organization, because that then helps everybody else understand how the system runs, and it's a healthy, successful system when you do it that way. So that's me. Happy to answer any questions you might have about me. We all have our own stories, is what I like to say. And so I'd like to hear a little bit of your story. It's helpful for me to know a little bit about you. So I got some questions, and most of you are almost done eating, and I'm going to finish my cookie now. While you answer, and you all can go in any order you like, but I just like to know, who are you? What do you do? What's your hometown? Just whatever you're comfortable sharing. Don't take 10 minutes apiece. Take just a couple minutes, because there's 7 or 8 of you. But how long have you served on the board? Why have you chosen to serve in public education as a leader? And then I'd like you, just for the benefit of me and everybody else in the room, share something that nobody else in the room knows about you. It can be personal, it can be professional, whatever. Just something you're comfortable sharing about yourself. Who wants to go first?
Don't look at me.
I've already said something on. Unless you're a principal, you're dominating all the time you have, with the microphone. No, I was the first one that went to college for my family. My dad would always tell everybody, you know, hey, I'll pay for your college, right, whenever you're ready. So my brother tried it, he was there 2 weeks, and now that's not for me.
Mhm.
And I worked real close with my dad, he was a mechanic, and so, I still love cars, and I used to work with him with cars and stuff. I never applied myself in high school. I used to hang around with, a lot of, smart people, but yet they didn't apply themselves, you know. And so I didn't do my book report, or didn't really strive to get an A. But when I went to college, my dad was paying the tuition. And so I had to, I finished in 2.5 years. I took the dean's, I had to get the dean's permission to take 21 hours, and he was trying to discourage me, and, you know, you have to be on the honor roll, yes. You have to, you're gonna go 12 hours from 8 to 8, yes, science major. So, I finished in 2.5 hours, and I kept on going to 60 miles away to Eagle Pass to get my master's, and finally got my master's, and then I got my mid-management. And so I started teaching when I was 21 years old. And I knew I wanted to serve my community, so I've been with everything from the Lions Club to President of the United States, elected to the Hospital Board, with Alliance. The next step was gonna be governor, district governor, cert, and all kinds of leadership positions there, but, I really enjoyed teaching. And so when I started teaching, I started, of all things, I wanted 6th grade science. I started with pre-K, kindergarten. And so I got all my certification for early childhood endorsement, bilingual. And I thought, well, everybody told me the same thing, stay there 6 months. I finished in December, so graduated in December. So next year, switch over to 6th grade. I ended up staying 7 years in kinder, because I really enjoyed it. I was the only guy there, besides all the ladies. But there was so much work to be done there, because physical education, art, to incorporate all those things, you know, hands-on kind of things, to build things with your hand, eye-hand coordination and so forth. So long story short, I went to administration, got hired. I was there 6 months, and then they moved me. I didn't even apply. They moved me to the early childhood center as the interim principal, and I stayed there another 7 years, and then went into elementary, then went to secondary. I at the first recognized campus in the secondary field, and then took a lot of my teachers to do, empower teachers to present at conferences, and went to the Region Center, back then, it was, they called it, it wasn't like it is nowadays, a Trailblazer School or something. They gave it a designation. TA would come over and interview teachers and be there for a couple of days, and then you made the Trailblazing category, and then you had to go present. We went to El Paso, took 3 teachers, went to South Padre Island, presented over there, because the scores had gone up. But from there, I went into 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and found out that, you know, the best way you can improve a campus is by hiring the best qualified teachers and using the evaluation system to really communicate with teachers about their strengths and their weaknesses, and then help them, because a lot of times they didn't have the resources on how to improve. Let's say in one of the areas was classroom management, organization, things of that nature. So way back then, when Harry Wong and the first days of school, there was a book that I kept with all my teachers, and have you read this book, have you tried to get a, you know, like a signed CD, and, but held by teachers along the way. And again, it take up the whole time, I'm not gonna allow any time for teachers like the rest of them. So that's, but I still enjoy what I'm doing, because again, I'm serving my community, I've been on the board 17 years, I think I'm in my 18th year, a TASB director. It's funny because 2 years, my wife was tired of, you know, taking night classes, and she said, you know what, I've got to go to a 4-year university. So what are you thinking about? She said, it's in Angelo. Okay. So back then we had 2 children and 2 boys, and so she left, and every weekend either she'd come over, I'd go the next weekend, and the kids were crying left and right. I don't want to go to the nursery. I want to stay home. Blah, blah, blah. So I ended up going teaching in San Angelo, and little did I realize they were just desegregating the schools there.
Oh, goodness.
One day, the parents 30 parents were standing right in front of my classroom, and the principal passed by, and I asked him, is it parental day or something? You know, he says, no, you're the first bilingual teacher we have in the school. They were just busing the bilingual students from their section of town to this nice school that I was at. And so all day long, I thought, like, man, I'm the only Hispanic here besides the cleaning lady. But it was an enjoyable time. I had such a great time. I went back and applied, you know, everything was wide open. Like, they were hiring Hispanics left and right because they were just desegregating the schools. And so, once I stayed there 2 years, my wife finally graduated, and then she kept on going as well. She went to Dallas after that, and I didn't go. I stayed with the kids here, but she finished, after 6 months, she finished everything. And so, but I've enjoyed every moment of it. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing as a board member.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Yes, I guess we're going this way. Yes, he agrees. Well, I'm Linda, and I come from a family of 4, 3 brothers and myself. And after working in the school district for 42 years, I retired, being an elementary teacher. That was not my chosen field, should I say. But after graduating from high school, my goal was to be study fashion, because I love doing that. But my parents said, nope, you're not going to go anywhere else. You're going to stay here. You're not going to go to New York or anywhere else. Okay, I don't go anywhere. So I stayed home for a year. After that, my father said, just go somewhere. Go do something. Okay. So I went to school, and I'm going like, okay, what am I going to do? So I got into the art department, got my master's in art. And then after that, elementary education, bilingual education. So I've done elementary campuses, counselor, district-wide, lead counselor, middle school assistant principal, which I love the middle school kids. Even with the discipline that they had, because all their stories would remind me of some of the stories that I went through. Like you mentioned, you were adopted, my mother was adopted. But at the same time, being from a Hispanic family, I heard my parents one day say, we want 12 hijos. Well, 12 hijos to me means boys. I'm in 6th grade. I'm like, they don't want me. So I remember that night going into my closet and sitting there and crying all night long. After that, I never, ever asked my parents for anything. I said, they don't want me. I don't need to be here. There were many thoughts about running away. What am I going to do if I run away? I can't run away. I don't have where to go. So I figured, no, I'll stick it out. So I did. Went to college, finished college. Then after that, okay, I'm out. I'll get married. I won't be in there anymore. Okay, so, but with all of that being said, leaving there, graduating, coming here, and I came back to Del Rio because my parents again said, you're coming home. I had a job at the university though, and head of the art department. But they wanted me here, so okay, no problem. I came here, I applied at Sacred Heart, but unfortunately, they were not open that day. So I was hired by the district the following day, otherwise I think I would still have been at Sacred Heart. Because once I started, I never stopped. With the middle school kids, their discipline was the best thing that there was because they had someone to talk to. And it didn't make any difference where they came from, because we were gonna start anew. And then from there, we opened up, Ms. Chavez and I opened up a brand new campus, Lonnie Green, where we started the first STEM program. We sent teachers to NASA for a weekend, but when they came back, they had to do something. It wasn't just go on a trip and spend the night. We had to do something. Then after that, I was there 3 years, got moved to another elementary campus, where we started the same program, but this time in the morning, because the parents wouldn't pick them up in the afternoon if they stayed after school. So we started a STEM program there. So at every campus that I went to, it was like, what can we do to make things better? The last elementary campus I was at was Eastside Elementary. And here also, we started, I did with the library aid. We opened up the campus at 7 in the morning. Kids came in, had breakfast, but then they started building. They had to research, and they had to build. So it was all geared into science. What do we need to do? But these kids were reading, they were writing, they were doing, and then they had to go and test whatever they made. So we brought up scores, and with bilingual students, their thing was, they can't do it. Yes, they can. They just have to have the tools to do it with. So they would write and research everything in Spanish, but I wouldn't accept it. I would tell them I need it in English. So get with your team, translate it. And they were trying so hard to translate it into English. And I said, you know what? You tell me what you wrote, I'll type it for you. And once they did that, I gave it to them. Okay, now hand it to me, now go build. So those were the things that kept me going with the different campuses, because it was not about us as the administrators. It's what can we do for these kids to build their future. Then after 42 years, it was like, okay, I want to retire. My mom was ill. The last couple of years of my administration, if my phone would ring a certain way, the secretaries knew to find me. I would get calls at midnight, ambulance was at her house. I'd show up at the hospital, leave the hospital at 2 or 3 in the morning, drop her off, get her fed, be back at school by 6. So I was always there before the teachers. That was one of my rules. I'm always there before the teachers. But I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't fair. It was not fair to the educators there on the campus, that if I was called, I could leave. If they were called, they couldn't leave until we covered their class. So that wasn't fair. So I decided to leave because of her, which was in 2016. And then the following year, I got convinced by several other teachers to run for school board. And I've been here ever since. So.
Thank you.
Right this way.
Yes, sir. You're the next one. Nobody else is next to you? No.
My name is Jesus Galindo. I'm from Del Rio, graduated here class of 2006. I have a wife who works here for the district as well, and I have 3 daughters. I have an 11-year-old, a 5th grader, a 4-year-old who will be starting school here in our district in August, and then I have an 8-month-old child. I've been on the board, this is my 2nd year. My background, I've been in public safety. As soon as I graduated high school, about a year later, I was a firefighter for about 4 or 5 years, a volunteer firefighter. I served as, I worked in radio then. I've been in radio for about 16 years. Worked as a director of operations for one of our local radio stations previously. I was a program director, and then in 2013 as well, I decided to try out for the police department, and that is where I'm currently am at right now. I was a patrolman. I've been an investigator for 4.5 years, a shift supervisor, and now I work in administration as the administration sergeant. and help oversee several departments there as part of the police department. I, have always had a passion to serve others. Obviously, in public safety, I've done that, but this was just another field, and if you're gonna have ideas or want a way to learn about something or progress, can't do it sitting from home, so you gotta throw your name in there and really try to put, if you have what you think is a good idea, try to push it and get some great help. So, I can truly honestly say that it's been more than I ever thought of working for the board or being with the board, because it's been a blessing. It's been great to be here, with the team that we do have. You never know what you're getting into or what expectations are there, but I can honestly say with these individuals, it has been great and keeps you motivated. It really does. And I really believe that the team that we have has a we mentality and not a me mentality. And that's something that at my other job we like to carry. It's a we mentality. It's not just about one person, it's about what we all can do. And we've been grateful for the board members, honestly, that have been here, because I can call any one of them and answer a question. And one thing is that we've always been accessible to our superintendent, and speaking of what we've been doing, and whether it's minor or major, listens to our concerns, and then his cabinet members as well, giving us access to them to get little things, because all these things always come up to you, right? There's always concerns, there's always things that you're gonna try to work best to work through some of these concerns. And that's what's been great, is that you still see results when you try to bring these concerns up, no matter how minor or how major. So that kind of keeps you goal oriented, that keeps you staying positive, and that keeps you just wanting to continue to serve. But it has been great. Like I said, I've been here 2 years. And like I said, it's more than I could have ever asked for. I really enjoyed it. And my hope is to continue working as best as I could. But yeah, there's not really much to me. I don't have a background in public education other than graduating from here and then, going through things, where you had that special educator who helped you, and also going up against a tough educator who may have lit a fire in you that you're glad that you were able to put out and really progress. But nonetheless, we do have a great community, a great district, and that's just basically in a nutshell.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, I'll start. I don't know where to start. I have so many things about myself that I could share, I guess. I was raised here in Del Rio coming from a family of 8. My parents were, especially my mother, more controlling, and so her main focus was education. And so each one of us, maybe I graduated with a degree, but each one of them, of my other siblings, had some sort of certification on the 2 or Border Patrol. And so they did very well, despite we were that many in the family. I come from the barrio of San Felipe, which many people bring it down. To me, it is more historical, the best place you could have been raised, coming from the school of San Felipe, which consolidated in 1972. I believe it was 72, 71, 72. 71. Okay, 71. And so when I graduated from high school, I worked at the base, at Laughlin Air Force Base, for about maybe a year and a half, going on 2. And then while I was there, my boss, what I would call my boss, wanted Mr. Deaton. I still remember their names, Mr. Reed and Mr. Deaton. That was a long time ago. And so they wanted me to stay at the base and to get my, civil service. Mm-hmm. So then I thought about it, but I thought to myself, if I stay, then I'm gonna have to stay, and my parents are gonna expect me to stay at home, And at that time, parents, you do what the parents say. And so I applied for airline stewardess. And so you had to send a picture and you had to send weight, and they were very, very strict. So then I thought I'll never get in, but then I got a letter that said, you know, report to Dallas. And they gave me the location and everything, and so I really wanted to do that, but again, my parents, my mom said, no, you can't. Yeah, and so then I said, okay, so I guess I really did what they, you know, more or less told, and then that's the way we were raised, and so then I decided, well, then I want to go to school, and then I told, I was still working at the base when, and I told Mr. Reed and Mr. Deaton, they were beautiful people to me, and so I said, you know what, I want to go to college. I didn't know how I was going to go. I said, but I want to go. And so I applied for a loan, and so I started at Southwest Texas Junior College in Uvalde, and then from there I moved on to Texas A&M University, and I made friends that have been friends for life, you know, which very good experience. Came back, I went to Mexico with got married, came back and got married here in the old Roswell Hotel. But that used to be the best you could use here in Del Rio, you know, it was real pretty at that time. And so from there we got married in Roswell. From there my husband and I had 3 children. We moved to Monterrey, Mexico, so I was teaching there for 4 years. I got my teaching degree. And then from there, after that, I came back with our children, and I got a job here at Lamar teaching special education. I'm certified in special education, bilingual, and elementary up to 8th grade. And so my husband stayed in Monterey for 2 more years. And so it was a little difficult with me and the kids, but we made it. And so I enjoyed teaching. I guess nobody never said anything, but I did do some presentations, bilingual presentations at Texas A&M University, worker myself, which went very, very well. And so I enjoyed that. And then after that, I have taught just about every grade level, exception for 2nd grade. Then I became an assistant principal with Ms. Linda, and from there on I was with the district as an AP, many times taking over as a principal for long terms. And then my mother got sick, and I just retired after 30 years. Then that's I have a long story, but I'll make it short. So then after that, I just, I'm here, the reason I'm here with the board is I would get a lot of calls. I did try political stuff before coming into as a board member. I ran for a JP judge, and I won over Mr. Missa and 5 other people, and then won the primaries afterwards, and then the second year around running, I lost by 400 votes, which was not a lot to the Republican Party. And so after that, several teachers, ex-teachers would call me and say, why don't you run for school board? And so I finally agreed, and here I am. And I love it. I am glad working with this group right now. I'm going on 2 years, like Mr. Galindo. And what you said at the beginning about speaking what you have in mind, at the beginning, I was like, my mind was going crazy. It was like, no, it's not supposed to be. But since the camera was there on the board meetings, I was like, what if I say something and it's like, I'm putting myself, showing my ignorance in this. So yes, I did keep quiet. I'm outspoken, I don't think I've really shown it here prior to this. But, anyway, I've enjoyed it. I wrote a book, yes, I just wrote a book, which I found out later, after I had time for me, I found out I have many other talents, and I say many because, you know, one day I wanted to be like a motivational speaker. I don't like my voice when I speak, but, you know, that crossed my mind. I've always liked writing. When I was a teacher, I would have, at the end of the year, I would describe each student and I would give them a poem. And, you know, it was for that was the end of the year that I would do for them. And so, I enjoy the superintendent that we have today now because I feel very comfortable. I feel like if I ask anything that maybe just doesn't make sense because we're still learning, I'm still learning. He just takes it and answers my question or whatever. I don't ask that often, but I think that he is more than welcoming questions and doesn't show any, you know, sign of like, oh, I'm bothered with this or that. And I like that.
Thank you.
I'm Amy Haynes. I'm born and raised right here in Del Rio. I have two kids, Quincy and Raina. Quincy will be 33 in April, and Raina will be 23 in July. She's a piece of work. She keeps me on my toes. And Quincy's an old soul, so he's very laid back and he's very old manish right now, very old man type. But let's look at the questions. I teach preschool in private sector. I've been there almost 9 years now. I taught first grade 7 years in a private sector, and I love first graders. It is the best. But I also like preschoolers. They're even better than first graders. So I love little people. So I didn't think so, but my mom was at Laughlin for 30 plus years, and she retired from Laughlin, and she taught preschool. So she encouraged, and I absolutely love little people. So, and I teach in a private sector. It's right here, the Methodist Church. So that's where I'm at right now. What else? I have associates in child development. I worked at Laughlin for 12 years in an after-school program. Me and two other coworkers, we still keep in touch. We ran that after-school program for about 6 months without a director, and we were recognized for it. So it's very interesting. Lots of work as military is totally different. And everything is constantly changing, and so many regulations and rules to follow. What else? I was harassed to be on the board in a good way. My father, before he passed, my father also was the chief of this district. He opened the police department here at the district. So he got the school board application 12 years ago and put it on the stereo. He says, I got something for you. I said, oh, what you got? And he was like, an application for you to run for school board. I said, oh, no, that's not happening. So I said, oh, I don't want to do that. That's not something, I don't want to do that. Because Dad also sat on the school board also. So, but I was like, no, that's not for me. He said, yeah, it is. We need some new, young blood, fresh energy. And I was like, yeah, okay. So it's that, and it's that. And he's like, that school board application is on stereo. When you gonna fill it out, turn it in? I was like, Dad, I'm not gonna turn it in. That's not what I want to do. You know, that's not, I'm not moving toward that. So he was like, okay, Amy. And then he was like, it's the last day. You go fill out that application. You turn it in. And I did before the time was up. I was like, okay, I'll just do it. And you know what? what? It's the best thing that he's ever encouraged me to do. And he's encouraged me to do a lot of things, but this was the best thing he's ever encouraged me to do. And I'm the big, I cry. So yes, that's another personality that I cry all the time, but he could have ever had me do. And because I love kids, I'm a people person. I'm just like him. We can't go to the grocery store without having to stop and talk to somebody for 30, 45 minutes. And I used to complain. I'm like, Dad, come on, because I was his HEB partner. I'm like, come on. I'd circle around. He'd still be in the same spot, and my kids are like, you're just like your dad. We've been around like 100 times, you're still talking. So we have the same kind of traits and stuff. So that was the best thing he could have ever done. I've sat for 12 years now. I have had people run against me all the time, one person, two people. And this year, it's coming up, I don't have anybody running against me, and it's truly a blessing. I give it all to God, because it's just like, oh, it must be my time. I think people see that I'm truly who I am. I'm not wishy-washy. You're gonna get Amy all the time, just tennis shoes, t-shirts, and jeans. That's pretty much who I am. It's not gonna change. I'm always gonna be true to myself, and just to help people. And you said it's a calling. It is a calling, because I thought I didn't want to run anymore. I was like, I don't want to. I'm just tired. I don't want to do it. But you cannot. It's like, you can't. It's a calling. And when God tells you to do something, you fight it, but then you stop fighting it. You're like, okay, Lord, I'm going to get it done. So I am doing it again, unopposed. I'm super excited about that. I give him praise every day when I get a big smile on my face and thinking, wow, nobody ran against me. My community trusts me a little bit, It's a good feeling. So, if you did not know, I'm a big Twilight junkie. If y'all didn't know, I love Twilight. I like vampire movies. And I used to count out every movie that came out. My coworker that I would work with, she would take my class, and I'd go get at the first of the line and sit all night long to the midnight showing. So I don't know if y'all knew that or not, but I like Twilight. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan. So, that was the last one. So, like I said, I like people and I love kids. So it's all about kids and what we can do for them and the staff and stuff like that. So, but yeah. It's just,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carlos?
I'm born and raised in Del Rio, for the most part. Because I was a kid. My mom was working a few jobs. Dad was never in the picture, so they'd send me out to West Texas to live with my aunts and uncles, and so I learned how to kill Johnson grass and other weeds in the cotton fields. It was a blessing, because I had love from all my aunts and uncles, and I learned very quickly that I was a favorite. It was just easy for me to tell I was a favorite, and I was in that position where I was the young one that wasn't in school, so I'm the one that got sent over there, and it was just such a blessing, because I never lacked for love, and I think that that's one of the things that just reassured me that in spite of any background or any other things that had happened to me or around me, I could be successful, because there was just a lot of love, and I'm just so lucky for that. I was the only one in my family that went to college, and I think I attribute it to that love that I got. Plus, I was being very hungry. Went to college. My best friends wrote the application for me to go to A&M. Otherwise, I would have never, ever thought I could be part of a big university system. I would have never filled out the application on my own, but they did it. And I got accepted. And once I got there, it was a different world. I got a Navy scholarship my third year at A&M. So I did 5 years, because they were paid for. Got a commission in the Navy, had no clue what an officer was supposed to do, or an enlisted guy for that matter. But every day I figured it out, but I always knew I would come back to education. Because in my family, if you wanted your picture on your aunt's wall, you either gonna go to the military or you were gonna go to college. So we all wanted our picture on our aunt's wall. So went to college and then I went to the military and got out, and I came back to Del Rio to start my teaching career. And I came and went to Del Rio 4 times. Hired as a ISS teacher. So God bless him for putting up with me. I was at a Navy mouth as a teacher, and I don't know how I not got fired. But I've quickly learned. And then I went to A&M to get my master's. Eventually I got hired here to be an assistant principal, and I wanted to be a principal, so I left Seguin to be a principal, and then I also ISD to be a principal. Came back to Del Rio as a principal, and then I wanted to be in central office, so then I went to Laredo to be in central office, and back to Seguin to be in central office. And eventually I got hired here in Del Rio. I'll never forget when I got the call that I was going to be the lone finalist. I went home and my kids were waiting because they wanted to come back to Del Rio really bad. My kids did. And they said, well. And I said, I think the pickings were really slim in Del Rio because they offered me the job. So I've been here, it'll be 11 years at the end of April. And, it's been a tremendous learning experience. And every year has been, this has been awesome. I've been so blessed and lucky, and I do it because I think that's just what I was born to do. Born to be in education. And if I'm lucky, I'll do it about 4 or 5 more years.
Good. Thank you. Well, Sandy and Sandra, I think it'd be good to hear a little bit from you since we're all in this room.
Well, I was born and raised here in Denver for the most part. My parents were teachers and administrators here. They gave their career here for the most part as well. I say for the most part because we spent a little time in West Texas where they got their first teaching jobs. But graduated from here and just got my first teaching job here as well after college, and started that 34 years ago here in Del Rio. And once I got ready to pursue postgraduate studies, I had left, and so I spent a couple years in Corpus Christi, Kingsville, and then took a detour to higher ed in San Antonio, Austin, and then during that time got into the world of school reform, and made my way back. Like Dr. Rios, came back a second time, and then went off one more time, and then this is my 3rd time back home. So excited to be here. Started last May and started launching some of the innovative academies, STEM, dual language, and New Tech Middle School, and now I've been doing a lot of work with the campuses on accountability and creating a data culture, having that drive instruction for differentiation and stuff.
Thank you.
So I am Sandra Hernandez. I am the Chief Administrative Officer. Probably been here for about 35-ish years. I've served with the school district about that long. My first role, I'm a daughter of 4 girls in my family, the oldest, and bilingual. So my first primary language was Spanish. It was not English. Grew up, came to school here. I was actually about to be born in California. So within a matter of a week, I was born here in Del Rio. So growing up, I did come to school here. Went to college, St. Mary's University in San Antonio. My degree actually have 2 degrees. I started off with pre-med, thinking I was gonna complete my pre-med, and I changed in my junior year. So I changed my degree plan and went into education with a degree in reading. And so with that in mind, I did teach 1 year in San Antonio, continued from St. Mary's to a private school, and also Fox Tech downtown in the middle of San Antonio. And then got married, came back home. I am a brand new grandmother, so first grandchild. So my role primarily is policy and governance, which I love. And I've taken on a great new role, which also I love, is bilingual education and special education, so special population. So I see it come full circle, because when I started teaching here, I went on to Elkhorn Elementary and became a dyslexia therapist. So had that as a background, having to work with special populations has kind of just followed me at some point, and so it's interesting to see it come back full circle. So been a pleasure to work with the board for the past 8-9 years, and I've seen them grow. It's been fantastic to see them collaborate and work together, and certainly see the superintendent grow over the course of time. So it's been fantastic to see this group really just come together and bond and really do what is the most important for their community. Is really, that's just number one for the children and for the teachers in the district. So it's been amazing and a great pleasure to be working with them.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, it is good to hear your stories. You all, it's amazing. I don't think I'm wrong. Everybody in this room, except me, was born and raised here.
Yeah.
And a lot of education experience, other background, lots of, it's an impressive group. This is exciting. So I look forward to the next little time that we're going to spend together. Let's do this. My watch keeps telling me it's time to stand up. So let's just all just take recently a 1-function break. That means get a drink, go to the bathroom, do something, but don't get on your phone and hang out. Let's just take like 5 minutes, just stand up, move around, take a little break, and we'll continue on. This is not on the agenda, but it's important, right? Because the one thing you read a lot about the importance of storytelling. And we all have our stories. Everybody in this room, and we could spend the whole time sharing stories and the lessons we've learned and helping others through that experience. But the other thing that, for a while I protected my story, but then I started telling it more freely. Because the adults in the organization benefit from hearing my transparent story. Kids definitely. And I could scale it from, elementary kids to high school kids, different, but I would always tell them one thing to make sure they understood. I have my story. I'm not special because you have your story too. And it may be a lot worse than mine, or it may be a lot better than mine, but it's your story and it's your experiences and it's your life. And we all have to own that and use who we are to help others.
I think it's because also they see it in the education system.
That's right.
But I also see it working with juveniles in the street, like
You
when
do.
we catch them at tough times and things like that. I've been called where there was juveniles at a hotel room and their mom left, and it's like, and having to find the little kid and where's your mom? And she left a few hours ago, but and so it's tough because they sometimes, they didn't feel like they were wanted, or they just felt like a number. So you feel for those kids as well, or the ones that get left, and so that's why I guess when you were saying it, it's like, well, I did it for 11 years, you know what I mean? Kind of, because you've seen it in real terms of how sometimes kids just get left, or, so it's tough, what I mean? So
It is.
that's why it's good. Your story, though, how it comes out in a great way, it's an inspiration, so that's why it's like, wow.
But this is the first time I've shared those stories with anybody,
Yeah.
so,
I know.
no.
Well, this is a private setting. But here's But here's the other part of it, right? You all, I know you all do this. As you're sitting on that dais at board meetings, and you're making decisions about budgets and safety and security and all of these things, it's the idea of always keeping the vision of each and every child. You know, one of the things in Pflugerville, or my first year there, we created our brand was each child, their future, our world. Because we wanted every person in that organization to be thinking about each individual child. And I know that's what you think about. You know, you've got some great goals and objectives. We're going to talk about those in a minute. But you can look at numbers collectively, but what really matters is every child having that experience in your organization. So with that in mind, let's transition. I want you to read this quote and tell me what you think about it. What does this quote say to you?
Leadership is the most important thing, you know, like to lead an organization with bright minds and
But it doesn't grow, your leadership doesn't grow either.
You have to have a vision to go above and beyond and to think outside the box, to go forward and to show other people that they can think outside the box.
you're always learning. Always.
Rebecca, what are you thinking?
Well, to me, leadership is having someone that leads, okay, but is very open-minded to receive what others have to say, whether it's teachers or, let's say, a principal, you know, to see all the ideas that come from the other, because from that, you can get one thing that you know what, that's true, let's change and do it this way. Leadership to me is just being a leader, having that know, being open to other ideas.
Appreciate that. And I think you've seen it applies at every level, as a principal, as
Yes.
an assistant principal, as a central office, as a superintendent, most certainly. But I think I've also come to see it applies at the school board level as well. We've talked around it quite a bit already tonight, but a lot of what it comes to, you've heard of the fixed mindset versus growth mindset. It's easy to get in a position like a board position and say, I'm here to govern, and this is what I'm going to do, this is what I bring, this is how I'm going to make decisions. But are you growing and expanding your thinking, like you said, outside the box, able to remove, because if you're sitting with a fixed mindset of this is what I'm here to do, and this is what we're going to do in this organization, any leader at that point puts a lid and a cap on your ability. I mean, some of the stories you told about desegregation, right? I mean, during that season, and everybody in this room we're all diversity. We've all lived the life where Hispanics can't do that, blacks can't do that. People put lids on, and there were constraints everywhere. And it took leaders being willing to say, I'm going to think bigger and better because I believe they can do that. They may not look like the majority group at the time, but they are capable, functional human beings, and if we give them the opportunities, the education, equip them, then they can thrive, they can grow. But it takes removing the constraining mindsets of the leaders. And so I want you to remember this as we move through our work tonight, because we all have we just naturally have constraints. We have biases, we have judgments about things, about people, about perspectives. So as we work through, as you sit on the dais, this would be something good to think about when you're being challenged on an issue that maybe you don't see it the way everybody else does. And I'm not saying you say, well, you have to get in line with them, but I'm saying maybe if we can all learn to think outside our own judgment, our own thinking, we can see ways to reach consensus when it's hard, when it's the hard conversations. And I want you to come back to that because we're going to talk about some harder things in a few minutes. But this is a quote that I really is important to me as a leader. You all have a strong vision and mission. And I didn't ask Carlos this, but it's my understanding the board would have adopted this at some point during the last several years. But when you think about what you're here to do, and I love how you talk about in partnership with families and community, you're gonna empower your students to excel, culture of collaboration, innovation, and achievement. And I take that to mean, you know, through your mission, that it's gonna be a high quality, innovative curriculum, you're gonna engage the students. And I love, like we were talking earlier, meeting individual needs of students. So you all are on a strong path. You know, you've supported that, and this ties into what some of you heard me talk about in Dallas in September, right? You have this plan. And when I looked at this, and I'm not here to evaluate your work, right? That's not my job. But I've done this a long time. And if you heard me talk, you heard me talk about how critical it is that we have a strategic plan that is board adopted, that is measurable, where we know what we're striving toward. We know, because we've all worked in organizations at some point, maybe even here before when you were earlier in your careers. There, you know, you'll have these soft goals, but you can't really measure them. And so with the work you have done is very strong. And you've laid it out over a period. And we're not gonna go into all of these, but I just wanted to kind of flip through them. Because when you think about, you know, they're about innovation, it's about strategic staffing to achieve the goals, instruction. It's, you know, you've got the core elements in place. And if you look at this document in front of you, I got a copy of this because I just want to kind of see the big picture. When you flip, I think it's a couple pages, what is one thing that catches, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Were you all on the board that approved this? Or was this approved before a couple of you joined the board?
Well,
Everybody? So this is your work. What is one thing you observe when you just look at the image of that document? What do you see?
Growth.
Tell me more, what do you mean?
We're more filled up in plans that were initially substantiated. When you're looking at white, that means it hasn't been done. You see more blue, so you're further along, I think, early on in the plan than maybe what some other areas would be. And I think that's an impressive thing. I mean, and if you're looking at things that still need some work, you know, it could have just been implemented maybe this year, last year. It was a vision, and a lot of the stuff was a vision, and now it's actually turning into possibly project completion. So I see a lot of blue in it. That means a lot of progress has been made, and that's what I see when I look at that.
Thank you. What else? Anybody else have an observation? Not necessarily about the content, but just what you see.
I see it as a roadmap because, you know, years back, you know, we had lots of tools, but we didn't know how to use like data-driven instruction. And so there's so much that we can gather from the information that we have, but we just didn't know how to use it. The best way to use data, and so every year we're improving on that, and it's a big tool, because that's how you're going to increase your learning and expectations in the classroom.
Good. Roadmap, completion, progress. What else do you all see? Anything else you want to share?
Well, I see like the highly effective construction, that really is something that is, that seems to be well done here as far as, you know, how the strategies that the teachers are using. This, I mean, that brings from, the training they've had, students to get, so I think we've advanced with that.
I appreciate that. But I like what you said, because when I read through it, it seemed very clear that you're gonna do training and then you're gonna measure, is that training being implemented?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if you ever, so here's how I look at it. When I see this, I'm gonna use a couple of examples. Has anyone ever run a marathon or done a triathlon or half a marathon, or has everybody ever just tried to say, I'm gonna lose 5 pounds? Or 10 pounds? And you,
I'll run a half.
okay, so, but here's, I've done 1/2 marathon, and I hit a wall at about a mile 11, out of 13.2, or whatever, 13.1. Those last couple of miles were so hard. About 15 years ago, I set a goal of losing 50 pounds. When I got to about 40, those last 10 pounds were so hard. That's life, right? Here's another little thing I'll share with you. If I stand right here and I say I'm going to walk halfway to the wall, and then I'm going to walk halfway to the wall again, and then I'm going to walk halfway again, guess what? I'm never going to get to the wall. Am I? Because I'm always going to be walking, no matter how close my nose can be touching it, but I'm still only going halfway each time. It's closing that last gap. And when I looked at this, I thought, you all are doing remarkable work. You've said what you're going to do, and you're doing it. And then I thought about this quote. The journey towards a goal may be marked with numerous challenges. It is often the final steps that the true test of perseverance and determination unfolds. Because here's what happens. Well, I'm going to finish this. The last few strides demand a strength of character and resilience that sets apart those who merely dream from those who dare to achieve. So when you think about executing, you two ladies, you had a big job in making sure the training, making sure the teachers are executing. And sometimes what happens is you do the training and you see the numbers start to go up and you know the teachers are doing it. And so what do? You take your foot off the gas just a little bit because things are going well. But it's still not completed. You still don't have every teacher in every classroom for every child. And one of my big things as a superintendent was making sure every child in every classroom and every campus had access to the best high quality education. And that's what I see in your document. And it can happen with principals. They start to, well, things are going well. So they start taking a little bit of the pressure off. They don't, and I'm not saying you have to just keep pressing and pressing and pressing, right? Because that wears people out too. But so you have to shift your leadership from we've had this good start and now we've got to get transition to kind of an intermediate season where we're sustaining and still advancing it, recognizing what they've done and that they're still on course, but we still have accountability to get to the goal. And we're still only 75% of the way there, 80% of the way there. And that happens at the board level as well. You've approved a great mission, a great vision. This documents your goals, the strategies your superintendent and staff are leading toward. And the question is, are you consistently as a board engaging with that in such a way that you're able to continue to provide the governance level support your superintendent and his team need to finish strong, to break the tape on the race, if you will. So what do you think about that? We're going to talk about it a little bit more. And as a matter of fact, before we go there, let's just, this is some information you were going to see, I think, at Monday's board meeting. They got transitioned to the March board meeting, I think. But these are just a couple of data points from your House Bill 3 goals in this year's taper report. So you can see you've got your goals, and if you can read that, you go across, there's red and green. There's some you're achieving, you're exceeding, some you're not there yet, but that's to be expected. They're goals for a reason. You're still a work in process in math, and in reading on the 3rd grade level. Then CCMR, the College Career Military Ready. These are closer, but you still have some work to do, to finish strong in meeting these goals. So again, kind of back to my question, what is your thought about that? As a board, how do you feel like you're doing at this point in engaging with this plan with your superintendent and staff in moving forward toward a strong finish by 2027?
The most important thing is to address instructional issues during the agenda development and to make sure that we stay with the program. Because a lot of times we tend to have distractions and it's not consistent with the way we're rolling the boat forward So, to stay with it and make sure that, we get the reports that are so important for us in regard to everything. We have a report, for example, on utilization of computer, software programs that we buy, and sometimes they're expensive, but, you know, we're getting the best use of all these programs, instructional software programs that we're purchasing. So we get a report to make sure that the utilization is there throughout all the campuses.
Thank you. Who else wants to jump in on that? We'll start calling names in a minute.
I just think that maybe, just, like Ms. Rosa said, staying on track and making sure that Dr. Rios, the cabinet, or whatever we can do for them, that we stay on the right track, and, what if we can provide, and, communicating, and like Ms. Rosa said, just communicating, and, and staying on top of things, because I do this, sometimes we let go and kind of back up, but without the push, but just making, that we're there, that we're on top of things. So making sure that we can help provide what they need to stay on track, so.
Good, thank you. Who else?
To me, and I couldn't read all those numbers, they were too small for me,
Oh,
even with my
yes.
glasses. But whenever I see red, I wanna know what students are missing the boat. Where are we? And what are we going to be doing for those students so that they can be achievers and so that they can also be passing? Because if we have a student that is not, then we're not doing our job completely. Because literally, we all say every student should be achieving, every student should be passing. We're not saying everybody should be at 100%, but every student should make some sort of growth. And if campuses aren't, then where are we as a board failing that campus?
Thank you, Brenda. Yes. Anybody else want to weigh in? I've written down 3 things I want to pursue a little bit more. Anybody else want to have anything?
I just want to say that the biggest thing is being consistent throughout the district and really keeping note of the data and the progress of the students. It should be throughout every grade level. So consistency would be a major thing.
Yes. Appreciate that.
I think just the wording is accountability and ownership.
Accountability
And ownership.
Ownership.
Exactly what Linda said. If there's a kid in the district that we need to help, we take ownership to know that, what is it that we need to help them with, or what do we need to give our staff, and things like that. And it's happening, there's ownership here, there's accountability, in different aspects, but just continuing that consistency and being able to take the accountability and ownership as your district.
Sorry.
And there's something going on, okay, why is this happening? Who's gonna account for it? What can we do to grow? And the ownership part is us acknowledging that, are we doing things correctly? Is there an area that we lack? And take the ownership and say that this is what we need to do with it. And own the faults and move forward and try to find some progress to but you have to do that consistently.
Okay. You may want to write a few things down as we kind of continue, but, so I want to dig a little deeper, right? Because everything you've said is spot on, it's right, it's the truth. You all are on point, you know what to do. But let's go another level down in terms of detail. Mr. Meza, you used the word distractions. What do you mean? What distractions can get in the way of the board staying on point in supporting achieving this plan? When you use that term distractions, what did you mean? And how would others define distractions?
There's so many things. To begin with, we're having these safety audits, and you think like, okay, we need to focus more on that. And, we're not gonna forget about this, but we're spending a lot of time on safety audits, or sometimes disciplinary issues that come up with a student or students, and so that kind of takes you away from the real picture.
Okay. Who else can talk about distractions?
Budgeting,
Tell me more.
distractions, I mean, what we're dealing with right now,
Mhm.
you know? We're at a standstill with funding for our district. We're taking away, trying to figure out how we're gonna continue instruction and what we're gonna do to maintain our district. When we could just continue on the course that we've been of getting funded, it's taking a lot of effort from the superintendent away to have to focus on that at 100%, when the core of everything that we do is instructional, you know, and he's working hard, trying to figure out how to maintain this district on a financial, after a financial burden, when most of his time has always been spent on instruction, curriculum, furthering what we can in the district, and that's been a huge distraction here in the last few months.
Okay, good, appreciate that. Good. What else? What other distractions? I mean, what else?
I'll have to say, I'm trying to keep quiet. But everybody's having trouble with finding faculty, you know, like staff, the bus drivers and paraprofessionals and so forth. Staffing has become so difficult because, you know, sometimes they think, well, I can get more money doing something else, you know, instead of teaching. So it has been a distraction for me because this is the first year that we hire administrators without full certification. You know, these are people that are going into administration and they're trying to complete their certification. And so I'm thinking, man, there's a lot to learn, you know, just simply with student safety. And so everyone is going through that. It's a big distraction.
Now, I'm gonna refresh the question, because when I look at things like safety audits, disciplinary issues, really even staffing to a point, those are management issues. They're not really governance issues. They can become governance issues to a point if you're being asked to hire, and I don't know what your policy is on appointing principals, but if you've empowered your superintendent to do that without board approval, then that's a purely management issue where you're kept informed. If you have to vote on a principal or an AP appointment, then yes, he needs to explain his strategy and his plan, but it's still mostly a management issue that is requiring the board's a little bit of attention. I'd like to focus, budget and funding, that is, the adoption of that budget, that is a fully governance issue. The preparation of the budget is the management issue. But this is a board issue for certain. But when you think about your operation, your functioning as a trustee, how your board works every day, the things you're inclined to do, what other things come to mind as potential distraction? Go for it.
And I was just thinking, distraction from TEA, habit, all those, regulations or mandates that they have. Sometimes that is a big distraction to how
Yes.
things are going to be managed here in the
Yes.
schools.
Amen. What else? Amy, you got anything that comes to mind? You've been doing this 12 years?
Why is it a distraction sometimes?
Life? Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Write that on there, life. Real life.
Capital letters.
Is it a distraction when you're in Walmart
Yes.
and somebody comes up and starts telling you?
By life, because it's not that we don't have a life, but we have everybody else's life. I don't like what so-and-so said to my child. I don't like the superintendent. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, you know, but no, I really, you know, I like you, Dr. Reese, but I mean, that's what we get, you know, we get that, you know, and
Not this hour.
yeah.
First hour was wrong.
But yeah, those are life, that's life, it's like, and then me, sometimes I take it on, it's a weight.
Yeah.
And then I try, you know, and I make, how do I think, how do I help? How do I figure it out? How do I help? But, you know, and so that's what I mean as in life. You're right. You're at the store, you're distracted because so-and-so didn't like that call, or they didn't like what you did yesterday, and why did you vote for so-and-so? And it's like, well, because I wanted to, and that's how I felt, and, you know.
And then the follow through, how do you handle those things? What happens when you get that complaint, that call, that person expressing displeasure?
Just listen. I try to be the best listener I can be. And I text Dr. Rios.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir. But yeah, I just try to listen. And you know, you try to give them the right chain of command. That's the main, the chain. I'm always about the chain. There's certain ways you handle these things. You know, I'll listen, but let me help you. You know, let's go ahead and talk to the teacher first, or then we can, if you're not satisfied, let's make an appointment with the principal, and then, you know, we have that, and then if you're not satisfied, there's certain ways you need to go. So, there's, you know, I try to just talk people that way. Let's try it here. Did you talk to so-and-so first, or, you know, instead of just rushing to the top, because everybody just wants to rush to the top. But there's a chain,
Yeah.
and you
And
have
by
to.
coming to you, they're really rushing to the top.
Right.
To the very
So
top.
that's why I said, did you talk to so-and-so first? You know, so.
As a board, do you all think you all do a good job of that overall?
I you know, have had tell me and ask me, and since I haven't been just going on 2 years, I don't want to answer and misinform them. So, you know, I just listen what she says, and then I'll tell them, you know what, let me get back to you. And then I call Dr. Rios and, you know, clarify, because, you know, I just don't want to give, I mean, some of those concerns of citizens are way out, that, you know, you have to be very careful how you respond back to them. You know, because you don't want to get anybody else involved, and you want to respond the proper way. So I get informed first, even though maybe I should know, but
Can't know
you know,
everything.
I don't have a young mind that I can remember everything that goes in the meetings.
Yeah.
I have to, you know, just recall, well, okay, what did we talk about?
Well, and honestly, you know, I'll also be candid. I always told my board, we have teachers, we have principals, we have assistant superintendents, we have deputies, we have a superintendent for a reason. And as a board, you all come in to do governance level work. You do not and will not ever know everything. And so that idea of somebody, but unfortunately the citizens who vote for you sometimes expect you should know. But it is good to have kind of that elevator speech of, you know what, my role is governance, and that is hiring an effective leadership team. And I'm gonna ask you to, here's their card, or here's their number, I'm gonna ask you to send that over to administration. You know, they'll be there from 8 to 5 tomorrow, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you. Or like you said, I mean, there's a principle, there's appropriate ways to deal with it. Because, but part of that, and this isn't the theme of tonight's training, but as we're on this point, there's this balance we have to get into sometimes of, do I wanna risk being reelected by trying to be the knowledge base and problem solver, or am I willing to just be the trustee I know that I'm really called to be, and that is to be a governing leader and to tell people just plainly, this is my role and that's their role. And, you know, always please let me know if they're not fulfilling their role. You know, if you do reach out to that teacher or that principal and you're just not getting resolution, then let me know, because then I can take it to a higher level as the governing board. But I can assure you, we have high accountability for them to address your concerns in a timely manner. Linda, you've been a campus leader. What are you thinking about all this?
think that a lot of times, like Amy was indicating, you run into people in the community, and because they do know who you are, they expect you to answer and solve their problems. But like anything else, number one, I always refer them back to the campus, because it's not the superintendent. Or we'll hear things like, I don't wanna talk to that superintendent, he never listens. Well, you're not going to the superintendent, you have to go to your campus person first. And any issues that you have with a teacher, have you discussed it with a teacher? Well, no. Well, that's the first person. If there's a concern, you have to start there, start at the bottom. And then your principal, if you don't get anything resolved. 99.999%, if they communicate with the teacher, their answers are given.
And those three little words that some citizens use, you should know. It's like,
Yeah. Well,
okay,
but
I
it's
would just
okay
say,
to say
thank you
no.
for the information, thank you for the information.
yeah.
But in always getting to the top, one thing that I did learn from my father was never deal with the middle person. He always spoke to him. And he was civil engineering at Laughlin Air Force Base for many years. So it's like, I never dealt with anybody here because I don't here. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, that's real. Well, let's keep moving forward here, because I want to, there's some things in here about team of 8 trustees and but you know this stuff, you're living this, right? So I'm not going to belabor it. I want to get to kind of the core of what we want to spend the remaining time on tonight. Because you brought this up, the idea of distractions, staying on track, getting the accountability reports, really exploring deeply, okay, I see a number, but who are the students who are not included in that number? I mean, you did accountability and ownership, but the thing that came up too loud and clear was budgeting again. And so I want to talk about that because, again, this is where I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute. You heard me talk quite a bit about this, and this is why I'm here. I thought I'd better just kind of refresh a little bit. When I was in Dallas and you heard me there, the big important part was how the boards I have worked with have framed their agendas, their meeting agendas, and their budgets to support the strategic plan. So just the concept of we don't plan a budget, we budget a plan. So you've got a very strong plan. Now the question is, what does it look like to budget to support that plan? And when you think about distractions, right, your superintendent's job is to come to you, with the idea of how a budget is going to support the 3 to 5 year plan. You've got a 5-year plan right now. These are old slides from that summer presentation. I'm just kind of refreshing a little bit. But it was all developed by the board, and it's a robust commitment to this community that this is what we're going to do in these areas. It's based in all of your values, beliefs, your mission, your vision, goals, objectives. And again, this was some stuff we did. But I wanted to point that out. Just like you, we had our strategies that we measured. That's what you were looking at. But this slide is beneficial, I think, because one of the things we did 2 things that were helpful. Every single agenda item that was on a meeting, a posted agenda, was referenced to the appropriate strategic plan area. That's a way to manage distraction. If there's things that are going on agendas that are not driving you toward that plan, then you have to consider, should they be on this agenda? And furthermore, should we be investing money in them? Now, here's one, you've got a strong instructional plan. Your plan, your strategy, the strategic plan does not have operational stuff addressed as I've studied it. So you're going to have some things on your agenda that are necessary. If you're ordering all your procurement, the materials and supplies, that's necessary stuff. But even those things, you should somehow be able to link them back toward your strategy. If you're going to order even furniture for a building to replace furniture, Is it aligned? Is it a furniture that's gonna enhance the learning environment? Or is it furniture that's just old school traditional, we're in chairs and we're not giving thought to that? As a board and as a team, everything you do and say, even if you're going in and doing some renovation to a building, you have to ask yourself, is it the right time to spend this money when we have limited funds? Is it the right amount? Has it, you have to go through the list of, we've lived with it for this long, should we consider living with it a little longer so that we can put money into our highest priorities of teachers and the curriculum and the strategies and the training that we need to drive instruction? You kind of see where I'm going there? And so what we would do in my last district is all of these bubbles and these amounts were our way when we adopted the budget of helping our board see this was $20 million that was directly attributable toward our strategic plan. Now you're gonna have staffing, and you're gonna have, just your electric bill, I guess, and that's one of the biggest in your budget. So you're gonna have operational things, but you should be able to, as a board, when you adopt that budget, be able to clearly see what the investments are in relationship to what your goals are. And especially when you look at the white spots that are not filled in yet, how are we investing money to close the gaps on this plan to get us to that finish line? And anything else that's not directly related, you should question and challenge, and the administration should be able to clearly articulate the why it's important and how it still is related. Now again, if it's toilet paper, well, we need toilet paper. But are we buying it in the most frugal way possible to minimize the investment? And I don't mean go get one ply, sorry. Sorry, that's a little too graphic.
You just been traumatized.
Sir,
Seriously, one of the things we're fighting over, well, not fighting, but kind of going over every year, is we provide 100% of the staff insurance, employee insurance, 100%. You want to be good people, but yet we understand that insurance costs go up every year, and so we've adopted a deficit budget. And you think like, man, how, I'm instructional, we're doing this for the staff, but then in my mind, I keep thinking every time I go to a major conference, I ask people there, are you all providing insurance? No. So that, it's a big amount of money to be able to fund 100% of the employees' insurance. That is not instruction.
so that's a great example of what I would consider a potential distraction. In distraction, we're using a very broad definition, but it's diluting funds that could be beneficial in other ways. But let's dig into that. That's a great example, and I'd like to hear other examples in a second too. But go ahead.
Well, the reason I'm for the teachers getting their insurance, because number one, in other areas of Texas or anywhere else, you have lots of districts, but here and maybe they don't have to provide that because they have more teachers or people applying, but in our location, here in Del Rio, we need to maintain our teachers. And we don't have the excess of other districts where they have a multitude of applicants, where here, people are looking for cities, or younger people are looking for cities with attractions, fun things and stuff. We have, and we're doing the best in this community. I'm not putting it down at all, because I think we're doing, it's a beautiful community to live in, but the young ones leave to other districts. So to maintain personnel here, we have to give them some sort of incentive, and the main reason for a lot of them staying is the insurance. So with the pay here, even though they get good pay, but who knows, other districts get a lot. So,
That's great. I mean, that's one part of this conversation. It's great.
And
And
I'm
that,
not,
and
I'm
that's
not
the same
against,
thing.
I'm not against it, it's just the fact that
No, you don't have to be defensive.
No. And I was gonna say the same thing that Ms. Chavez said, because of the fact that a lot of our teachers, and not just teachers, when we mention teachers, or when I mention teachers, I'm also talking about cafeterias, but for everybody in general that gets the health insurance. You know, I mean, I have a daughter that works in the Dallas area. She has to pay for her own insurance. If she were here, her insurance would be paid for, and that would not be a chunk that was taken out of her paycheck. Our teachers here, I mean, we have a hard time finding teachers. We have a hard time finding staff members. So by paying their insurance, it's like a plus for them because it shows that the district is taking care of their people. And I know that I've heard Mr. Mesa many times say, well, other districts, well, you know what? Other districts are other districts. Let's take care of our own. And if we need to be the first ones to do something, maybe we need to be the example for other districts to look at us and say, hey, you know what? They're taking care of their staff. They're taking care of their people. So that now they can concentrate on the educational aspect moving forward and teaching the kids without having to worry about their own, not having to worry about their families, or how they're gonna pay for anything else. And that's my view on it.
No, but I think this is important.
And you wanna connect, you're gonna run out of battery, it looks like.
Oh, sorry about that. So I'm gonna keep talking while I do this. Because I'm gonna ask, so here's the question I'm gonna ask. Have you had the conversation about this in a public setting? And have you asked your teachers if this, and your staff, if this is important to them? And here's why I'm asking this, right? Because as an outsider, and again, I'm not defending a position, I'm just challenging you to have the hard conversation about it and to really look at data and do some work on it as one aspect of balancing a budget. Some teachers might think about the idea, if you were to ask them to contribute to their insurance to a certain degree, and then give them a raise, the raise is gonna benefit their retirement over time. Paying their insurance is not increasing their retirement in the future.
and that's
And so I ask you that because there are a lot of questions that if you could communicate to people, if we did this, how would you feel? If we did this, how would you feel? That might help you be able to navigate the budget a little differently than, to help resolve some of the issues. Now that's one thought that I'm coming up with listening to the conversation. Are you all having those conversations?
I was just gonna say, that is so true. However, a lot of our teachers think, now I need my pay. Whatever, the pay is as much as I can get right now because of the cost of living and everything. Perhaps they think about the retirement, of course, everyone thinks about that, but for the moment, they think in the moments now, even though they know that it's not gonna help them much, retirement time, but perhaps they need that money now.
Yes, I agree. That's a serious,
Yes.
that's a real concern.
So what is gonna come up, and it's gonna come up here in the next, no more than 2 months, is gonna be probably a public discussion, because we all know we have a $7 million deficit, and through the suspension of some projects and a little bit of money in fund balance, we'll be able to cover most of that. But all of the other funding mechanisms to bring in extra money by moving the budget up to months, by having a rollback election, by doing all these things, we've exhausted all of those things by scrubbing down the personnel to where we have no excess personnel. So we've been doing that for years. So this year, there is no more budget cutting measures that don't affect students and don't affect teachers. So we're gonna be short about, after we cut everything, without giving a raise and without giving any money, we're gonna be short about $2.5 billion. And so we know that we've been talking about this, but we are gonna have to talk about that, and we're gonna have to ask ourselves, what do we value more? Providing teachers with a health insurance, or cutting overnight trips for UIL, middle school, or cutting, elementary librarians, or cutting, elementary, art teachers? But those decisions are gonna be made, and they're gonna be difficult, and when we talk about distractions, I worry that that'll be the biggest distraction that the team of eight
That's a
is gonna have to
distraction.
face.
That's a big distraction.
But unless the legislature has a special session, we're not gonna be able to avoid that talk. And my biggest worry is that becomes such a big distraction that we don't focus on the other work we said we're gonna focus. Because for the last, I don't know how many years, 5, 6 years, if you look at the difference in the board agenda, I don't know how many years, I'm gonna say 6 years. If you look at the items of the board agenda, you know, we're able to get feedback on instructional items. Like, for example, that deal about, hey, we want reports on how many kids are using the software. I mean, that flipped on so many switches because, you know, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, so then we're able to kind of gear some of our attention towards that. That deal about having Sandra, okay, Sandra, you're gonna do bilingual, because I need somebody at the Capitol focusing on that. Sandy, you're only gonna do CNI. You know, before we used to have all these things under CNI, and really being focused on instructional pieces, that's been the benefit of us developing more into instructional leaders. And I think that we're doing so well, but y'all allowed us that focus, and to a certain extent created that focus. And I'm totally worried that here in the next couple of months, when we have to say what we're gonna cut, you know, it's gonna divide us because everybody's gonna have different opinions. And at the end of the day, we might have to cut all of it, you know. I don't know how bad it's gonna be, but those are, I'm gonna say that's probably gonna be the hardest decision that this board's gonna have to make, that we've had to make in the last 11 years. Because in the last 11 years, it's been all about hitting it out of the park. We opened up CT Center, we opened up Early College High School, we opened up this building, we opened up the Laughlin School, we built Ceniza Hills. All that stuff that we did, we've been able to give 6% raise, 10% raise, the minimum salary is $15. All that is huge. So we've been celebrating all that, but all of a sudden, we can't do that anymore. Now we gotta see what we take back. And then people are gonna start saying, again, well, if y'all hadn't invested in the Taj Mahal, you know, we have our life insurance. Y'all remember those conversations, right?
Yes.
And that's my biggest, and that's one tremendous worry. The other worry I have is that we get so stagnant on that fight that we don't plan for the future. So for example, if I look at the next 5 years, we definitely, absolutely have to have a way of, we have to improve Buena Vista because that campus is super old. We have to fix Calderon, and we still have to fix San Felipe Memorial Middle School. So then we get so bogged down on this that we're not able to look 5 years ahead at what the next bond is gonna look like or what that's gonna look like. And so we have to be able to handle this big issue here, still plan for the growth or improvement of the district in 5 years, and be allowed to focus on teaching and learning everything. Because this is the most excited I've ever been about teaching and learning because of the way we're focusing. But man, my worry is that we're gonna not be able to sustain that focus because the next 2 months are gonna be very hard. Unless the legislature has a special call session, then they throw $4 million our way.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think if we sit down and we're very transparent, Dr. Rios, and the way we talked about it here is the way we need to talk about it with the community, because the way you just broke it down, it just makes you realize that, I see where you're coming from, Mr. Mesa, because we've had that talk for so long. And it's not that we don't want to take care of the teachers, but we don't have the funds like we used to. And nobody's budgeting. They're not even trying to budge a little bit to think about what's really going on in the real world here, right? So I think if you have the conversation, and this kind of setting, with the community and with the staff and the teachers, and say, look, just like you said, I think it transcends a little bit better, because it's just something you and I have talked about it, and I know it's gonna have to happen. I'd love to keep paying for insurance, because we've stated, it makes it easier. They know that that's taken care of. It's not, they have that money. But the thing is that there's nothing supporting us. So we have to, that's something, eventually, you said eventually, and eventually it's here. So let's just have to have the conversation like this, transparent.
And what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Amy, I've had that conversation
Yeah.
with some teachers. During the science fair, I was at the Civic Center, and there were a lot of teachers there. And there were several teachers that approached me about the arts. Says, are you all gonna do away with the arts?
Yeah, because I
And
don't want to do that.
And I told them, first of all, one of my degrees is art. And Dr. Rios knows that I will defend it as much as I can. However, when it comes to the fact, do we need an art teacher at every campus, in elementary? Yes, maybe so and maybe not. Now, you have a choice. We don't have any money coming from the state, and I've shared this with teachers. We don't have any money coming from the state. I will tell you, I have addressed every politician, Republican, Democrat, I don't care, anytime I go to a conference. So you all can send letters as well. Or we're gonna have to start doing something, either cutting back the arts, or you lose your insurance. You don't have that money coming in. And the first thing I hear from this particular group that I was speaking with, they want their insurance. So it's like, it's not that we're not having that conversation, but
And then, ma'am, we're asking our teachers, but we're here to service the community.
right.
So then here's the other part, and I think the only one I shared this was with Mr. Mesa. The reality, and this would totally, get a lot of people coming after us with the back. The reality is that we don't need Chavita Elementary. That's the reality. We don't need Chavita Elementary. Now, that means that the enrollment at the other campuses would get to 700 kids instead of 600, or we'll get to 800, but we don't need Chavita Elementary. And if we ask the greater community, see, because we get input from teachers, of course, they're gonna want insurance, but if we ask the parents of everybody else, it's okay, well, you know what, we can have our teachers, we can have librarians, man, we can save a couple $1 million a year if we shut down Chavita Elementary. They're gonna say, well, why'd you build a school to the north for the white people? And then over here, the neighborhood.
That's true.
No, they're gonna come back and say, Ruben Chavita was named after Bob Chavita's his son. So then, where's that name gonna go? I mean, you can hear the community.
That's gonna go to Garfield.
That's gonna
It's just
So,
that
I
these
mean,
are-
it's like, yeah.
These are very difficult conversations, and if we give the teachers insurance and take away art, the parents are gonna, the community, the parents are
Yes.
gonna get fighting mad, and they're not gonna be supportive of people that say, oh, so you did
And UIL?
in UIL. So
I
then
mean-
what do we do as a group to be aware of everybody? Because the decisions that we make, you can't take them back to next year.
What I want to say is, eventually, we're gonna have to make that tough decision, eventually. And I like the fact that Dr. Dupree has been a superintendent, and this is why I like the idea. I've been telling teachers at convocation for the last 3 years, eventually, you're gonna have to pay your share of the insurance. What I don't want is for us not to give a raise, because you understand that raise every year picks up their level when they retire. They're gonna get that raise next year. Even though Dr. says no raise, yeah, to me, I'm saying, man, I was like, I went through 2 years with no raise during my term as we here, but the fact is, that tough decisions gonna have to be made sooner or later. And I'm praying that there'll be a special session called by our governor, but yet, I know in my mind, his priority is gonna be vouchers again, and so I'm thinking, man, give here, take away here,
Yeah, we need to live in reality, but we kind of know where that's headed. Let me ask you this though, in a typical year, what does your budget conversation look like? Do you do a projected 3-year budget when you present the budget for approval in the boardroom?
No, I share with the board, like, for example, with the insurance scenario. You know, 3 years ago, I told them, at this rate, we're good for 3 years. So then, last year, I shared, this is probably it. This is probably the last time we can do this. But, you know, when we make major decisions on raises, or on anything, insurance, really it's insurance and raises. Insurance contributions and raises, I tell them how long it's sustainable for, and that's the projection that we have. So if y'all remember 3 years ago when we said, you know, we can do this 2 more years. Last year I said, without the state's aid, we're cutting into the 75-day fund balance, which is kind of where we're at right now. Because we can fund it up to a certain point, but then we got to cut. Now we're at points where we have to cut, and we don't have any more personnel to cut. Last year we did things like, we don't need 3 ROTC teachers. 2 of us can do it. The ROTC teachers were upset about it, but whatever. Fine arts, dance at the high school, I only need 1 dance teacher. History teachers, yeah, you can have 32 to 1. We make those kind of decisions, and so we got as much as we could out of personnel. But there really is no more.
And now you're to the bone.
We're
And so, I guess in my observation and experience, transparency and authentic in conversation always wins the day. Having an honest conversation. So as I listen to you, Carlos, talk about the structural things, the buildings you need to deal with, have you given thought to in the boardroom saying, here's our strategic plan through 27. We're adopting a budget for 24, 25 this year, but to complete this plan successfully, these are the investments we're gonna have to make in 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27 to complete this plan. And by the way, these are buildings that need to be addressed. These are some things that need to be done. And kind of lay it all out between now and 27, and so that the community can hear we're thinking about, because what the community reacts to is, well, they're not thinking about my building falling down, and they're not caring about my kid over here, and they're not caring about what's happening at this school. But if they hear a presentation in the board talking about the next 4 years or 3 years, all of these things that are going to need to be done, and how are we going to do this? And now, what hard decisions do we have to make to do all of these things? Then, you know, I'm sure you all have seen it. They don't always like the outcome, but at least if they feel informed and like they had a voice. And so, like you said, for example, there's certain things that teachers may absolutely say no, that all the parents would say, yes, please do that. But there's also, that's where the leadership is critical, because you know, if you can't hire teachers, everything is sunk. You know, and there's always the balancing act but getting people to give feedback through surveys, because sometimes the voice of the parents will resonate louder about what needs to happen, and it may even be opposed to the teacher's voice, depending on, but that's where you've got to balance, okay, how do we value each of these voices? But to have some public conversation and really make it a comprehensive conversation. So it's not just about, are we going to do insurance or not? It's gonna be about, when are we going to do these renovations? When are we going to do this? how are we gonna do that all in one comprehensive discussion?
And the discussion really is much bigger than what we can even fit into to one evening or even 3 evenings. But if we remember all of the construction that we've done over the last 10 years, that's because previously buildings that hadn't been addressed. So my concern is if we start taking things like UIL and art, and then a couple years later we're back in the same situation. So now we've upset the parents, kept some of the teachers happy, we've upset the parents, and now we're gonna ask them for a bond election to fix some of these buildings. How much have we damaged that relationship with parents? You know, and I don't know what the answer is. I just know that these are all things that we have to think of because this team debate, I believe we've done a really good job in providing for our teachers. But I think that we're at that point where, okay, so now it's kind of like when I had to tell my son, sorry, you're on your own, buddy. You know, move into the house and pay for your own apartment. You know, so now we're at that point, and man, it's hard. All of a sudden, I'm not the favorite dad anymore.
But as I'm listening to you though, think about, I mentioned looking forward 3 years to the end of the plan. Maybe you need to look back 5 or 10 years. That, you know, we've had to make these investments in aging facilities for these reasons. Because then that helps to mitigate some of the, well, there goes a Taj Mahal, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. When you can articulate clearly, this was a 70-year-old building, or however old it was, that we brought back to life for this investment instead of rebuilding it for this. You know, it's all part of telling the story. And the board, you know, and again, a lot of the story is told in the board, with then followed by administration to push stories and community meetings, however your approach is here.
Dr. McGree, if I may, it helps for me to be with TASB because there's 45 people who are from all over the state. My partners in San Antonio, they're cutting the health teachers. The same thing, deficit budget, you gotta do something. We're cutting all the health teachers, it's not mandatory to teach health. And so the parents right away started saying, they learn about nutrition and development and, you know, so, but they're gonna do it. It's just the reality.
We have to. I mean, some of the largest districts in the state right now are closing schools. I mean, Spring Branch ISD in the Houston area, they just cut librarians at all their schools. I mean, it's happening everywhere because of the budget issues. And you've got to capitalize on that, and it's horrible, but it's the reality. So you've got to tell the story very publicly about what you're dealing with, because most people are not really paying attention to what's happening with vouchers. They're hearing a lot of the noise, and you all are living it here in your community about immigration. That's dominating the headlines, the federal battles back and forth. But people are not necessarily attending and aware that no money's coming into schools. And they're never gonna hear that unless you all use your voice in this community to tell that story and to advocate for how it's affecting you directly. But then that's part of, it needs to happen in the boardroom, it needs to happen via your social media channels and your district. There's all kinds of, every avenue you have, you've got to be telling the story. If you as board members go to Rotary, Exchange, whatever you're engaged in, your churches, Knights of Columbus, whatever it is you do, when you have a forum to tell the story about, hey, we're making some hard decisions, here's why. We don't like having to do these things. We know it's not best for kids, but our core business is getting these kids ready for life, you know, with a solid education. And if you can always come back to why this district exists, and there is no debate ever that UIL adds value to the student's education. That's important. But is it important to invest money in these overnight trips and out-of-town tournaments and a lot of things? And of course, then the coaches are smart. They'll go to their booster club and say, well, can you raise the money to fund it? You know, so that's the hard part, right? Is there's always certain kids will still,
Right.
because they'll have parents and booster clubs, people who will make it happen for them. So again, that's another part of the complexity, because not every kid's gonna have a booster club behind it.
It's this is how difficult piece in terms of time to think this semester has been. So, you know, when the teacher has had an allotment, this board had encouraged us to move forward with it. And as I visit with my fellow superintendents, you know, a lot of them just didn't do it. They shied away from it because of the competitiveness between teachers and who's gonna get paid. So then when we did it, and we finally figured out how to improve on it, it came down to principals having to be tougher in how they evaluate teachers. Otherwise, TA is gonna disqualify everybody. And I was initially worried about how to go tell teachers, hey, you know, if you got a 3 or a 4, chances are this year you're gonna get a 2 because your data didn't show it, and you just have to be open to getting a 2 and learn how to grow. And I was so worried about that. But then once the reality of the budget hit in, where the first special session, second special session, third, and nothing came of it, all of a sudden that was like, okay, put your big boy pants on, you know, get that out of the way, do it, because there's a bigger task to do now. Because this budget thing is gonna distract us, and when we take from somebody, it's gonna affect somebody else in a personal way. And it really may be where we have to take from everybody. And I just worry that this team is gonna get bombarded from teachers and from community members, and then how do we respond to it?
But even with that explanation, with the teacher incentive allotment, teachers learn that you can have great evaluation for this teacher, but you've got to have the growth match that, student growth match. So there's some learning to it.
There is, and that's gonna be a whole nother political challenge you're gonna face, because they want the money, but the reality, like you said, of what the evaluation system has to look like, that's gonna create, and so what that brings me to is the mindset about, one of the things about teacher retention is truly, what is the district culture? And, you know, it seems like you all have a robust, positive culture. I hear so much about people just loving coming back home to Del Rio, even everybody in this room, you know. And so it's the idea of what is the culture like? Can your culture sustain some of these budget reductions and shifts you need to make? Because at its core, what we're really talking about here is not really cutting budgets, except because even though we really do need to pull money legitimately out, but there's a lot of shifting of funds that needs to take place to redirect from less important priorities to higher priorities. And that's part of the public conversation, is this is important to us. It's not unimportant. We value it, we believe in it, but this is more important. So we need to pull back here to shift the money to support this. And so I think the insurance issue is a prime example. Yes, this is important. We know teachers value this and want it, but this is more important. So we're gonna have to pull back on this a little bit. And again, that's just this one thing, but you could think of many things as a staff that you can propose. Like you've even mentioned, I mean, sometimes it's kind of like what you do in polling for bonds or polling for the elections. If this happens, what would you say? Who would you vote for? If this were the case, what would you vote for? It's almost like, okay, here are a choice of options of cutting this budget, rank them, 1 to 10, 1 to 15. And let teachers do that, let community do that, and see what the outcome is. That may be a very telling, you know, because when you can compare the teacher perspective to the parent community perspective, it can sometimes bring some patterns to life to really help you be able to determine, okay, this is the path forward on this.
Well, I don't even know if this is in context, but I'm gonna say that anyway. So the team of 8 makes certain decisions, and the community criticizes to a certain extent. And then others are really appreciative of these decisions that are made. So if y'all remember, 6 years ago or 9 years ago, whenever it was that we opened up this building. And we got a lot of people saying thank you for restoring the historical building. And then you had some people that were just, you know, you let the superintendent build himself a mansion and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But today, when the city didn't invest in their historical buildings, you know, the Christmas
They're right
concert
here.
for the community was here, the Miss Dogo pageant here, that theater troupe, you know, they're having their place here. When they need a place for the water district to have their meetings, it's here. So I know that if we get through this decision and we still have an eye towards the future, people will eventually, you know, come around. And I really think that, like what Amy said, nobody's running against Amy, nobody's running against Josh, because some of the things they made noise about, they created the distraction, they really weren't substantive. Whereas I bet if their kids weren't getting a certification, or they weren't getting an early college, you know, associate's degree, or just really weren't having that experiences that they're having in the elementary, then we would hear a lot of the noise. But this noise is gonna come up, it's gonna be loud, and we just have to be ready for it. I don't read Facebook, and I don't go to Walmart.
We do.
Go early in the
Well,
morning
sometimes
or
we
late
just
in the
have
evening.
to accept the fact
They still do.
that we have to be open and do what is best for the school, the students, you know, and then just let everything fly over our heads up to, because we're never gonna satisfy everybody. We know that. We know that, so we have to be open to say, okay, what exactly, and really look at all the venues here and say, what exactly do we have to do and do? And, you know, I mean, that would be whatever decision is made with the board and the superintendent is gonna be what we all think is the best. Even though we might not like it, but it might be the best of what we can do, and there's some people that are not gonna be happy about it, and so be it.
So to that point, and I think you all know this, but one of the conversations the boards I've worked with had on often was that their remembrance that they are not representatives, but they are trustees, stewards for the community's public education system. And that idea that you do, it can't be, well, I represent the voice of the teacher, I represent the voice. It is, I've got to do what's best in all angles, from the instructional outcomes to the financial outcomes for this community's investment, the significant amount of tax dollars they pay personally as homeowners and as the state invest to get every bit of value out of every dollar to the full extent possible. And it's hard because there's never one answer. Because there's always good choices and good things that would be good to do. But what we're finding, you know, someone was telling me the other day, well, you know, we're just gonna have to close some schools and then tell the state, well, see, we had to close schools because you didn't pay us any money. And I said, no, they're not gonna buy that. They're gonna say, well, you were inefficient. If you could close those schools and save $3 million, you should just close those schools anyway, whether we give you money or not. And so that's part of the political agenda that we're struggling with, is it's hard to tell the story, because if you have a school that can be closed to save $2 million, reality is, you probably need to do that. You know, if there's a way to do it and get the kids safely to another school without making them ride a bus for an hour, you know, in your community, that's probably very possible. And so efficiencies, and that's kind of what the state keeps grinding toward, is you can stay open. You can always find ways to save money. You can put more kids in classrooms, you can close schools, you can do things. And many of those things are not desirable and maybe not even good. Because it's good to have community schools where the kids can walk. But when you're stressed financially and you need to find the money to keep driving the benefit, well, here's a good example. So for example, when I was in Fort Bend, we had a program called Reading Recovery. if you've ever had that here, but it's basically a program where you have a teacher spends half of every day, they teach half a day, and then they have half a day where they work one-on-one with usually about 4 kids. So you're spending millions of dollars to help a few first graders read on grade level in first grade. Well, we realized how much money we were spending to touch these few kids, and we said we could touch thousands of kids for that same money by changing that program to another more impactful program. Well, the teachers fought us very loudly in the boardroom because they liked the opportunity of what they were doing. And the parents said, well, my kid learned to read, but all the data showed they lost that progress by 3rd grade. But nobody talked about that. They talked about their reading on grade level at 1st grade. And that's important. They were struggling readers. But when you really look at the big picture, we had to pull that significant investment away from a small number to benefit more. So there's so many ways you all can look at so many decisions. Then how, for example, if you're sending a group, a team to a UIL for a few nights in a hotel, how much are you spending on that? I mean, it costs. And if you send a band to the state UIL contest, it's probably $25,000–$30,000 in a large. I don't know how large your high school is, but in a large high school to spend a band, it was costing us that much for every band that we would send. And of course, they've earned the privilege to go to that state tournament, but that's a whole lot of money. What could you do with that $25,000 that could impact more kids? So these are the conversations. These are the this is the hard work of the staff to bring forth recommendations, and the board to have to say, this is what we think and this is what we're going to support. But it's also your job to challenge, right? I mean, you can't just accept it. I mean, you can, but most boards I work with haven't. Because you are a trustee for the children, for their parents, for all taxpayers. So you've got to squeeze every dollar, every value out of every dollar that you possibly can to the full extent possible. So what else? What else do we want to talk about? We're about 20 minutes from our 3-hour mark, so we could probably wrap up if you've had enough, or we can keep talking for a little while longer. So what are you thinking? How are you feeling right now? Probably a good thing to process a little bit. What are your thoughts about the conversation tonight?
It had to happen. We have to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that, there'll be a special session, but it doesn't look like it. You better have 9A. And, it's not, nobody wants to make the hard decision, but it's something that will have to take place. And I think communicating, in an open meeting is going to do a lot of good, because they need to know where it's coming from.
I wonder if, that interactive budget reduction sheet that I mentioned to you all about. I'm not saying we should do this, I'm just saying we're gonna put it out there, so in one of our budget workshops, we'll discuss it. So we'll have different options on how to remove that deficit. And you click here and you save X amount of dollars. You click here, you save that, and so eventually we'll get to the 2.5 million or 3 million of insurance goes up. And all these things that we talked about are options. But I wonder if we had focus groups at the different campuses with just parents and ask them to click on it. I wonder what they would give up, the actual parents, the community. And that, now obviously that would create more chatter around it. So I just wonder how y'all feel about that.
I would prefer something like that, you gotta be transparent.
Yes,
That's,
transparent.
and the thing is it doesn't, whatever, it's gonna trigger no matter what. But if you allow people to be involved and you get the most results out of it, and you try to go, and it also has to make sense with what we're doing. I think overall, we gotta look at that because we're based off making choices off what we're trying to understand. But we also gotta look at the community, we gotta look at the employees, and we gotta look at the parents to where they're coming from. Because for all we know, we could put this out and 80% of everybody's gonna say, raise up my health insurance. That's fine. I want my experience as a teacher to be consistent for the next few years. And we're over here stressing about taking away health insurance when maybe 80% of them are gonna say, I don't want it. That's fine, raise it up, charge me my $50 a check. But you know what, because some of the chatter that you'll hear, huh?
75.
75? Another rough hour. Some of the chatter that I've heard is, yes, we want more, in the pocketbook. Then you'll hear some of them say, but I'm kind of getting frustrated because every time, maybe we get this cut, or you know what, I'd really like to still have this aid over here, but because of the budget, maybe we can't have them. So now that's extra work on us that we're doing, or we're cutting down on the experience of the staff, or we're cutting down on the experience of the students. I, for one, with anybody, I do not want to cut health insurance. That would be the last thing I want to do. But we have to look at, and I wouldn't want to, and if there's a possibility there to save it, save it. But when we're looking at the experience and we're talking about continuing teachers, the other thing I don't want to do is cut jobs. And I think we were sitting there Saturday when Josh said that at Fort Worth ISD, they're already cutting jobs. I don't want to send any of our staff home completely empty-handed. That would be completely opposite of what we're trying to do here. Is it a hard fact to swallow? Yes, even because I would not want to eliminate health insurance. But if we give that option to everybody to have input, we got to make sure that they understand their input is as valuable as the decision we're going to make. And, it's not popular. There's going to be chatter. There's going to be that. It's just like when we do these surveys and the calendars and we see all these things. But what did that do for us when we just saw the calendars? We all read it and we were questioning, okay, why was this done? And there is justification for things that you do, and it's understandable. All I did was ask the question, you gave me the justification, that's fine. Because every decision we make has to have value and justification of why we do it. And I think that's the main thing with the public and their trust. If you made this decision, you better be able to justify it when you're out and about and explain to us why you did it. But it's a hard decision to make. It's not going to be something that's easy. You can hear different things. Like I said, yes, we want the raise, and then you'll hear some, yeah, I would want it, but I'm getting tired of this getting cut. Oh, in the art department, we can't go and do this because we don't have money. We don't have this. So we're kind of constricting the experience when, we can continue doing certain things. Like he was saying, I don't want to have to cut a school down. Definitely not. I don't want to have to cut librarians or art out. But we have to look at, also what's going to make sense. But I think valuable input is also one way to start.
I think it's going to be difficult, but I think that if I understand how y'all want me to proceed in terms of getting that input, and we've talked about it, then I know we're going to be okay. It's kind of like I tell our principals, I say, look, if you do what we ask you to do and you fail, we fail together. And if you go off as a maverick and do something that we didn't agree on and you fail, then you fail. And then you're on your own. So it's okay to fail, we're gonna fail together, but don't go fail on your own. That's not cool. Well, same thing here. If we go and understand and we carry that plan out, then I'm gonna be okay no matter what happens, because I know that it was discussed and agreed upon here. But that same thing, I understand what Becky says. If we ask the parents in the north side of town, they're gonna say, yeah, close down children.
But I'm just looking, and I agree with what you say. However, I'm looking at from a different, I guess, perspective.
Mhm.
Cause if you know, you send like surveys or data to parents or teachers, it's gonna create more, this is the way I see it, okay? I'm not saying you're wrong,
No,
but it's
yeah.
gonna create, to me, it seems it's gonna create more chatter in the community because they, first of all, need to understand, like, we're like understanding all this, but they're just gonna see that with no understanding of some of the things. I mean, they're gonna create their own understanding,
Yeah.
which might mislead to something else. Whereas if it's a form or something where you can just explain, many times it needs explanation to the parents specifically, then perhaps there would be better understanding of this, of what needs to be done and what needs to be done. I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Well, so let me when I talk about community surveys, that's what you're describing is what that's what I've done, that's what we've always done. You cannot simply say, choose among these 10 things to cut the budgets, because they don't have the background. But to put on a series of meetings that are scheduled at times where teachers can attend, and, and you're small enough, maybe you could even do it at each campus.
Like you were doing.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to create work for you, sorry. But the idea of, and you go and you do the presentation, here's the reality of where we are, here's why. And then have 2 or 3 evening meetings for community and parents to come and hear. And then what we always did is we would have table conversations. So it wasn't just we talk and then everybody does a survey. We would have them at tables where people could they could dialogue and come up with their collective and, have conversation around the tables.
And I think that's what I mean by the input, I know we can't do a community-wide survey, we're gonna get 20,000 results and we don't know. But what he did when you went to the campuses, and I was not able to go to all of them, but I went to the last one, having that deep-rooted conversation to explain, this is what's been done, this is what's possible, I think they were appreciative to hear you're actually telling me and being transparent and telling me, look, we're at a negative right now.
And I think
And
you
this-
brought it on the one that I went to. I think you kind of mentioned something, you did bring forth a little bit, of the financing and all this. And I mean, the teachers there, it was good because they were all attentive and they were like focusing on the superintendent, except for one that was on the phone all the time.
That's a
But
former
anyway,
administrator right
yes.
there.
But even this, the way, an idea would be is, I'm sorry, Dr. Ruth, but hitting all the campuses again, but with us, with him, and support to explain this. And then afterwards, we still do, like you're saying,